Bullshit.
Pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe free of bullshit and full of bold solutions. That's what the No BS Marketing Show is all about. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Carrie Nardini, a creative entrepreneur. One of her endeavors is I Made It Market. She has so much more we'll learn from her. But first, let's cut the bullshit. Why do people struggle to admit mistakes? Instead of telling the truth and explaining what they learned, people just make shit up and expect those around them to believe it. It's actually comical. I guess it's partly what people have grown up with, or partly watching other famous people lie, or maybe their parents told them admitting mistakes were a sign of weakness. Whatever. It's BS. When you admit you're wrong, a number of things happen. First, acknowledging where you came up short enables you to learn and grow from the mistake. Subconsciously, you're able to think through what happened and how to improve. Rationalizing it away prevents personal growth. Equally important, you show others that you value trust over pretending to never be wrong. This show talks about mentors. One of mine, George Hartnett, used to say, trust begats trust, because you have to trust others first to earn their trust. People won't truly trust you until you've trusted them. Admitting your mistakes earns trust. Admitting mistakes also shows vulnerability in you as a leader, which increases accountability. Team members see that it's important to have each other's back. You gain their respect. And when one person doesn't admit a mistake, the tendency is to want to assess blame. So the blame game begins and nobody wins. Cut the bullshit. Admitting you're wrong is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. The No BS Show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nobs. Try a book like The Girl with the Lower Back Tattoo by Amy Schumer. You can download it for free today. Go to audibletrial.com/nobs. Again, that's audibletrial.com/nobs for the free audiobook of your choice. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Our guest today is Carrie Nardini. Carrie is a marketing, fundraising, social media manager, events organizer, skilled in coordinating multiple projects simultaneously, and ultimately a creative entrepreneur. She's the founder of I Made It Market, director of both A Fair in the Park and Neighborhood Flea. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Thank you.
So let's start by having you walk us through your educational background and your career journey to where you got to today. And then we're going to spend a lot of time talking about these three cool endeavors you have going on.
Okay, sure. So educationally, I started the University of Pittsburgh as I would say pre-medical sort of major. My mother had told me I wanted to be a dentist. Her father was a dentist, and Pitt has a great dental school. So I went there and did the freshman regimen and realized that it wasn't really for me. I wasn't willing to dedicate the time and effort that it took to being just all bio all the time. I enjoyed bio and chem, but where I excelled was writing. So I ended up, like many young people do when they first go into school, I changed my major to an English writing major, because the other bit of advice my mother gave me was that every business needs a really good writer. So I did nonfiction and was focused on journalism and magazine writing, but I always knew that I wanted to own a business. So after working as an editor and in a marketing department for a nonprofit where I did pretty much everything, I decided to go back to school, and I did the CATS Graduate School of Business program part-time at night while I was working as an editor and a manager of a team of 7 writers and an assistant for a company downtown.
You can tell us who they are if you're okay with that.
So it's a fun company. It's called Invention Submission Corporation Technosystems. So all day, every day, I was writing about inventions and editing and leading my team in their product writing. I created style books for them and things specific to that job, as well as doing a little bit of PR. So it was a great learning experience, especially as a manager.
So that's what I wanted to ask you about, because creatives, whether it be writers, designers, marketing strategists, they are interesting to manage.
Yes.
So talk about managing.
It's funny that you would say that. Not everybody recognizes that.
7 writers.
Yes. So, and I had an assistant who is a wonderful person, and I still look forward to seeing updates from him. He's been traveling the world and changed career paths a bit, but I had an assistant, him as an assistant editor, and these 7 writers. And I would say that I do draw parallels. I talk a lot about managing the people that I work with, the creative artists and small business people, as very similar to the writers, because we established a routine. I had to be tough, which was hard for me. One of the things I will talk about as a vulnerable trait would be that maybe I'm too soft on people versus too hard on people. And I'm working on that a lot. So I had to establish myself there as their leader. And I had some great bosses at that position that helped me to grow into that, because I was really young in my career at that time.
So you had seven different writers.
Yes.
And you said you had to bring them some structure.
Yes.
Talk about how you motivated them, because each of us are different in any field, and
Sure.
particularly in writing. I know that having led creative teams and writers and designers and so forth, some writers just move at a much more deliberate pace, but still can get it done. And others can move very quickly. They might need a little bit different type of motivation.
Spot on. Yes. So we had, over the years, I had many writers and interns even. And I would say that there were people who just slow but steady, getting it done, having fewer revisions. We worked on revisions and getting everyone's revisions down. It was a very much a specific writing style, and there were specific products they were writing. So we were able to make it more formulaic. And so through weekly meetings and then spot checking with people, I was able to establish what their system was and then work with them to improve so that they were writing more toward the style the company was looking for and hitting all of the marks. It could get a little monotonous. So that was something else that we worked on too, was making things a little more exciting whenever we could.
With 7 writers, just curious, how often was there turnover? I often found when you had teams of writers, there was that last spot would often be a rotating one for whatever reason.
Again, spot on. So we did have trouble. We would find people that were typically right out of school. And so they would either get with it and it would work for them, or their life was a little bit in turmoil, or, things were moving because they were young. And so we did have a lot of that, and that sucks up a lot of your time. And so one of the things that one of my supervisors there worked with me on was how to manage that as well, and sort of how to be tougher about that with people and not give them so many passes as they were getting into the position, because maybe actually from our standpoint, the position wasn't right. We gave them a number of chances and just didn't work out. So there were different ways that there were different personalities, and there were different personality clashes. And so a lot of that became a great learning experience for me, a really wonderful learning experience. I actually was cleaning out some paperwork in my office over the last month, trying to clean up and get organized. And I ran across some old reports that my supervisor had written on and given me some pointers. And it was really interesting because a lot of them, I could see them still ringing true in a certain way. And so I actually messaged her and I thanked her for being that thoughtful and pointed in her feedback to me.
That's all about leadership. And that's what the NoBS marketing show is all about, is leadership and communication. So I want to talk about something else that had to be a challenge. You get accepted into one of the top graduate schools in the country, CATS, while you're
on my birthday.
On your birthday. Now, see, that's a birthday present.
Yeah.
While managing 7 people and having to produce your own creative writing, talk about the challenge of doing that.
So I'm a doer. I'm one of those people that is always really interested in getting things done. At that time, I was also involved with a project in Pittsburgh. There was a sort of there was an organization called Ground Zero Action Network before 9/11. And so that was a creative effort by a number of people to make some really special things happen around the city. So one of those projects was called Flux, and it was a art show that moved around to different neighborhoods, and I was on the organizing team as a volunteer. So in addition to working full time and doing the school part-time, which was 3 classes a term, 2 to 3 classes a term, each term 3 terms a year for 3 years. It was a lot of work, and I needed to have that. So it worked for me. And I learned as much from being on the Flux team, I think, as I did from being in school. And I learned how to manage my time really well. There were times where I might have dropped the ball on one thing or another because I had to focus more on the other, but I wanted to do all of it. So I made it work. So that's something that I still do today, is that I try to learn how to prioritize my time so that I can get as much done as I want to.
A 3-year process to get the MBA from CATS. And while you were doing that, you were involved with Flux plus still working full time.
Yes.
So now you get the MBA. What did you do? Did you stay at the current company for a little bit longer? Did you make a leap somewhere?
While I was finishing up school, I knew that I wanted to do something else. I had been there long enough. I had learned what I needed to learn, and I was interested in being in a more creative agency. So I did a lot of networking. One of the places that I networked was a friend who was in the MBA program at Chatham invited me to a talk at an ad agency, and I really loved what I heard there. And so I asked the principal out to coffee, and she and I got along really well. And she said, I don't have anything available right now, but when I do, I'm going to give you a call. And so a couple weeks after I graduated, she gave me a call. And so I was able to move over to a creative agency where I was an account manager and writer. And they had a time of change there. So
what was that agency?
That was Fitting Group.
Okay.
That was Andrea Fitting who brought me on. And so they had a changeover in their staffing at that time. And so it was a really good time for me to learn a lot. And I had some really great accounts. And so Andrea was able to teach me a great deal about agency work. And ever since, I'm dating myself here, but when I was young and I watched 30 something, I was always interested in having some sort of a job like that.
It was a great show.
It was, yeah.
It actually makes lists of the top 100.
Does it really?
Yeah.
I was young. I don't remember what years it was on exactly, but it just struck a chord with me. And I thought, wow, that looks like so much fun to do for your living. Even though it's high stress, there were definitely some, there were some deadlines that were difficult, and there were some things I had to learn that I didn't know, but I was supported, and it was a really good experience.
That show had kind of the same impact on me because I was a teen,
yeah.
And I remember watching that thing, and I wonder if that's cool to do that. And then it's funny, I hadn't thought about it till you just said that, but I do remember watching that and thinking that.
Yeah, I don't think about that very often, but in the agency sense, I do.
The No BS Marketing Podcast with Dave Mastovich is brought to you by Mass Solutions. Put our 3-step No BS process to work for you. Visit masssolutions.biz today to take your marketing to another level. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.
So you were with Fitting Group, and you had some mentoring there. Andrea, really strong leader and creative thinker in the marketing and advertising space. And you were there how long?
I was not there very long. I was recruited from there by the United Jewish Federation. They had a marketing position open, and a woman I worked with in my first job knew that I was happy at Fitting Group, but she said, why don't you reach out to Carrie? So my boss there took me out, and I was really interested also in learning the development aspect. So I wanted to know about fundraising and learn about fundraising. And at the time I had been in a young leadership program there where I was learning about how that system and the community worked with fundraising and allocating funds to beneficiary agencies. And so they offered me that position where I was half marketing and half development. And I took that, and I was there for a number of years until I went to Philadelphia when my husband took a job there. So it was, that's sort of been, I've been always a writer, always in marketing, always creating. When I was at the United Jewish Federation, which is where I went to, I had always been a crafter and interested in taking classes. I had a friend that she and I took some classes at the Pittsburgh Center for the Arts around that time, just for fun and to be creative and get our hands dirty. And I was selling jewelry that I made that I had been sort of making since high school to people that I worked with. And I noticed that there weren't a lot of opportunities at that time, and there weren't a lot of shops that were doing consignment and taking local artists' work. So I had been at a craft fair at CMU, and I met this young woman named Nina Barbuto, who is a wonderful force in the city of Pittsburgh. She's the director and founder of Assemble, which is a nonprofit STEAM organization in Garfield. And she works with adults and children, educating them about all of those wonderful technology and arts and science things and having hands-on experiences. So Nina and I sat next to each other at this craft fair, and we got to talking, and I was like, I really feel like I want to do something because there's all these people I know and they want to do this as well, but there aren't very many outlets for it. So Nina said, she was sort of the person to get the party started. I had the ideas and she was like, let's do it. And so there was someone there in the room who managed the Garfield artworks, and we went over and talked to him, and he said, sure, I'll rent it to you. And then I met some other people, and boom, we created, it was originally the I Made It Sunday Market. And the first one was in Garfield in 2007. And that was at the time. So I was sort of looking for a creative outlet outside of the work that I was doing, which was very creative, but it was in a different sense. So this way I was able to do what I wanted and just be accountable to myself, really, as far as the creative went. And so that was a really exciting endeavor for me to take on.
So you'll be able to celebrate your 10th anniversary of I Made It Market next year.
Yeah.
Exciting. So tell me a little bit about who are your mentors other than family and how they've impacted you.
So throughout my career, I would say that I've been lucky to have supervisors that have been really considerate and interested in furthering my career and saying, how can we look at what you're doing and lead you where you want to be and where do you want to be? Because I think a lot of times people don't ask that, or, they just keep plugging away and they don't think, what is my career trajectory? And so I was lucky enough to have that. And so I would say that one of my first bosses was a woman named Rachel Marcus, she just retired after 50 years at the Jewish Community Center. And as I was listening to many people roast her last week, all the things they said rang true. She was fair but tough, and she was compassionate, but she wanted you to be aware of what you were doing and do the best job you possibly could and be a good person in doing what you were doing. And so people were joking that, when they get a call from her still, they get a little bit of a shiver and think, oh God, what did I do? And so that, I think that sort of is telling of the fact that she was on top of things and she would hold you accountable. And so there were many times I was in her office where she said, hey, Carrie, what happened here? And like you were saying in the intro, owning up to my mistakes and learning from them. And she did a lot of that with me. And so she was someone that I still go back to. And it's interesting. I think that people's businesses will grow a lot from mentorship. And I've been sort of searching for a current mentor. So that's something else to talk about at some point, is sort of how do you find those people? There are many people selling their services, and there's many people you encounter, but they're very busy. And so it's sort of an interesting process of finding your mentors, whether it's through their teaching or, a live in person.
I think early in our careers, it's more natural, because when we're in our 20s, say, and we're in our first 10 years of our career, many supervisors can become that if they even try just a little bit. So when you have a boss that really didn't mentor you, you kind of can see why they just didn't make the effort. It does get a little bit harder as you get further in your career, because it's just different, because you might even be getting mentored by someone younger than you or the same age or only a few years older. So it's a good point, because I ask every guest this question, and we find that some people have 1, 2, 4 mentors, and some for different things. Like one person told me that this one mentor taught him all about business development. And to this day, when he's out selling, that person is an influence. But then he had to have other mentors, because one was more for his specialty about how to actually do the work. And another one was for leadership. And I've had 4 to date that have really made a huge impact. But you're right. It's like you always wonder, where's the next one coming from?
And things are shifting so much, so quickly technologically. So there are different ways of implementing your services. So that's something also that I keep in mind. And my business is different than very many. I think there aren't too many that parallel what I'm doing, and I'm sort of making it up as I go with input from the appropriate places, but it's a work in progress constantly.
Well, I want to get into all of the different businesses because you've got some major, unique, creative entrepreneurship stuff going on. But before that, I have to put you on the spot.
Okay.
And that's the one where we ask every guest to talk about a learning experience when maybe they were a BS employee, a tough boss, or their communication wasn't what it needed to be. So looking back, when do you think you might have been guilty of some BS? What did you do about it? And what did you learn that could help our listeners?
So I would say that when I came back from Philadelphia, I became the social media manager for a Fortune 500 company, and they had never had one before because everything was so new. And I went in there with my experience, and you have to be learning constantly. And I was spending much of my day before that and during learning exactly what it was that I was doing. And I think that now it's been a number of years, so there are some more structured learning opportunities, but I was sort of making it up again as I went. And what I ended up learning there was that I wasn't really doing what they were necessarily wanting to have done, but also their company wasn't structured in a way that worked for that. So I ended up doing mostly reputation management versus actual social media. And so I ended up leaving because it just wasn't working for me. I felt that I wasn't being true to what I was supposed to be doing, and I just needed to leave it.
Mm-hmm. So from your standpoint, if you had to do that all over again, what did you learn that you would do differently?
I would take my time and do a little more research. I loved my supervisor there. She was wonderful, but it wasn't a good fit for me. And while I tried, I think I wasn't doing the job that they needed to have done. And, conversely, I wasn't being the professional that I wanted to be. So I would consider my options before saying yes to something just because it sounds great. Because it did sound great. It was the first social media marketing manager. And at first it was really exciting, but if I would have thought it through, I should probably not have taken that position. And everything, worked out fine. But there were times along the way where it was just like, what is going on here from both sides? Mm-hmm. So I feel like the better choice would have been to just move on and continue doing to continue building my business. And at the time, I think I was nervous to just jump right in because it was a wonderful opportunity to have sort of a safety net, which I think a lot of times entrepreneurs fight with that thought of, and the people I work with, when do you make the leap? Is there a net? There isn't a net, but will a net appear? These things are things people say all the time.
No.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, you have to do the work, and sometimes you do the work and it actually doesn't work out.
And that scared feeling doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Because I'm still scared.
and that's the thing. It's the fake it till you make it. It took me a number of years to feel comfortable going to the supermarket on Tuesday afternoon. Mm-hmm. Because in my chest, I would have a tightness and like, I shouldn't really be doing this. I should be working right now. But the fact that I work 80 hours a week at different times and had a child 5 years ago, I was working at 4 a.m. if I had to, because that's when I could work. So if I went to the supermarket on Tuesday at 3:00 in the afternoon, then that's when I did it. So it takes I do feel like it takes a long time to own that. And that's something some people probably do accept earlier, or maybe they feel that fake it till you make it much stronger than others.
On the entrepreneur scale,
yes,
that's that person that is pure serial entrepreneur that mm-hmm. doesn't get quite as sick as the rest of the people on the meter do. Like I'm probably middle to upper tier of that entrepreneur meter, where I have a entrepreneurial spirit, but mm-hmm. I'm nothing like these people that are risk takers and they're mm-hmm. able to jump from company to company. And I admire it in some respects, in other respects and not. But so on that meter,
Yeah.
It impacts how you feel.
And you and I both work with businesses that are in different sides of that. And so for me, it's really interesting. I worked with a husband and wife that quit both of their jobs to start a small business, and they had a child and a house and everything. And so their ability to make these leaps and my ability to be a consultant for them, you have to sort of measure the advice that you're giving out based on what their expectations are and where you think they can go, but what's realistic as well.
Yes.
So I get super excited about launching. I love The Art of the Start, which is the title to a book that I've read. But it's also, I just really get excited about new endeavors. So that's potentially why I've started a number of businesses, but also the reason that I like to work with all of these people who are starting their own. Mm-hmm. It affords me the ability to get into their excitement. And then once they're off and moving, I can move on to the next thing.
When you took the social media manager job, I'm wondering if you had the same thing happen to you that happened to me in a couple of positions that, as you said, when you look back, you go, it all worked out and it all worked out great for me. And it was all part of the learning experience that made me what I am. But there were a couple of jobs that I shouldn't have taken. But I'm wondering if this happened with you. You just convince yourself that you're able to do it. There was one where I clearly wasn't a fit and I kept going, I can work through that.
Yeah, I could do this. Of course. Yeah. I think I feel that I do the same way. I say yes a lot. And so as I grow in my business, I have hired a team, and that was something it took me a really long time to get to. Really, really, really longer than it should have, way longer than it should have. But now that I've done it, one of the people that works for me, her job is to tell me to say no, because I have a really hard time looking at opportunities and thinking, no, you can't do that, because I look at it as an opportunity for my people that do my events. This is an opportunity for them to make money. And so I should figure out how to make that happen. Mm-hmm. And so there's an art in that as well.
Well, you mentioned, I mentioned your bio, the founder of I Made It Market, you're the director of A Fair in the Park, you're director of Neighborhood Flea. Let's take I Made It Market, because you touched on that already during this episode, and then we'll make sure we touch on the others in episode 2. Talk about what I Made It Market is today and you're passionate about it. Okay.
So as I mentioned earlier, I Made It Market started as an opportunity for me to sell work that I made along with other people that I knew, to sell things that they were making and to get together and be a community. So as I talked about my past work experience, a lot of it was in nonprofit and community building. And then from the social media aspect, a lot of social media is about online community building. And so I just really am a big fan of, and what makes me tick is making this community happen and connecting people. I like to be a connector. And so I Made It Market is these pop-up art fairs, craft markets that happen all over the city of Pittsburgh. And it started much smaller. Our first one was 20 people. Our second one was on the mayor of Braddock's front lawn. We had one at the brew house that I worked with CMU grad students, and we did a fashion show and a fundraiser for the brew house. And so I get to go around and meet people and connect with other communities. And I try to fundraise or raise awareness for community and arts organizations in Pittsburgh while putting on these markets. So it's a combination of the actual selling and learning how to sell and getting businesses up and started or expanding businesses, and also in building the community. So the people who are my vendors, the people who are just interested, the longtime shoppers, new shoppers, people that just like to be a part of this. And so it's over these 10 years become much, much larger. And it's just so, it makes me tick, it makes me, the passion is there every single day. Even if I get like 3 hours of sleep, I wake up and I'm like, this is hard right now. This is a tough time right now, but I love what I do. So after A Fair in the Park in September, I was totally wiped out, and I had a Neighborhood Flea that weekend, and I had an I Made It the next weekend, and I was done. Like, done for as far as timing goes, and the number of hours I worked and the physical labor that was involved and all of the details. But I turned, to my husband one day and I said, I'm exhausted, but I am so happy with what I'm doing. And so that's sort of the passion behind it. Is what I say to people, what I do is I call myself a marketress, because it's marketing and the markets. So ultimately what I want to do in all my businesses is help small businesses make money and tell the stories of these small businesses, because they're all each so compelling. And as a nonprofit marketer, or just a marketer in general, that telling the story is one of the most important aspects of growing a business and growing someone's brand. And so that's what I really aim to do every single day.
Hear more of my interview with Carrie Nardini on part 2